Hi, I'm Brett from papercartridges.com, and it is Take Your Ramrod to Work Day. On several of my videos, mostly shooting for speed, like doing the 5 round challenge, or setting the infield land speed record, or shooting the brown bess, um, I get a lot of comments, and by a lot, I literally mean hundreds of comments from people saying, "Why are you putting the ramrod back in the slot underneath the gun? Why are you returning your ramrod in the rammer channel every shot? Why don't you stick it in the ground or lean it against something or just hold it in your hand?" They say you will be able to shoot a lot faster if you're not wasting time to put the ramrod back into the gun. So I thought that's actually a good question. So hence I am here at Take Your Ramrod to Work Day. And it would be slightly faster, that's true, to not have to fumble around, flip the ramrod, put it back in the channel. Like you can stick it in the ground, lean it up against a convenient fence, but it only saves you time in the most ideal conditions. So the ground has to be just soft, soft enough that you can stick the end of the rammer into it, but not dry so that the rammer will fall over. It needs to be nice, soft, perfect condition ground, and it has to stick up right there, and it can't adhere too much dirt and other stuff on it because that could slow you down too. The only reason we're doing this is to save time. So. In a perfect world, which almost never exists on the battlefield, it might be a little bit faster. You know, you might save 3 seconds per shot, maybe, but this was never taught. It was always discouraged. Soldiers were always emphasized the ramrod gets returned. Armies that fought with muzzleloaders in linear warfare, you're fighting in 2 or 3 ranks. You're not standing by yourself like I normally am at a shooting range. You are shoulder to shoulder next to the guys next to you, and you don't stop moving. It is very rare that you're in a deployed battle line and you stop and you stand there and you fire more than 2 rounds. There is lots of movement. You're constantly moving. We, when we do these speed challenges, we're shooting for speed. We can forget that in the 19th century and before, defeating the enemy with firepower alone was a almost a foreign concept. That's a modern concept. In the American Civil War and before, in the Civil War, we're using French-inspired tactics. Hardy's tactics is chasseur bayonet-centric tactics. Fire shapes the battlefield, but you are moving quick. You bring the battle to a decisive end with the bayonet, and you can help get there with fire, but it's the bayonet that is decisive. Fire is not decisive on its own. So during these mid 19th century battles and prior, you're not standing there in lines shooting back and forth at each other, like you might see at some of the some of the less authentic Civil War reenactments, for instance. You just stand there and you're firing in a line that doesn't move for 30 minutes. So if you stick your ramrod in the ground to save time, so you're in one of these lines, you move up, and the command to fire comes, and so you fire and you go to start to reload, and you stick the ramrod in the ground, and the next thing you hear is by the right flank, march. And before you even know what's happening, the whole line has turned to the right, and now you are moving. That's a movement order. That's a facing and movement order. Very, very common. And your ramrod is somewhere, but the line is now moving. The line is now a column, and you are now moving, and your ramrod is gone. You have now lost your ramrod unless you have the presence of mind to grab it right away. And you can't just jump out of ranks and run back and get it. If everyone is doing that, now your line is reduced to chaos. Everyone's running back to go look for their ramrod. Whose ramrod is that? That's my ramrod. Just not going to work. And I have experienced this in Civil War reenacting. And I'm one of those hardcore authentics, and I do go to the occasional event that does allow you to ram. And if you get a movement order, even if you're in the process of loading, that is that's chaotic enough without having to remember, oh, my ramrod is stuck in the ground back there. So if you lose your ramrod with a muzzle loading rifle, your gun is now worthless as a gun. You can still use it as a pike, assuming you haven't lost your bayonet with some other scheme, but you're not going to be able to shoot anymore because you can't ram your bullet down the barrel. So you keep your ramrod back in the gun. You return your ramrod every time. And also, if you were to try to stick it in the ground, the sergeant's going to come up behind you and smack you. So, for your health and safety and to be able to stay effective in combat, return your ramrod. If you're doing trick shooting, speed shooting, or if you're shooting for the NSSA where they don't let you put your ramrod back, hey, it is what it is. But in actual battle, actual soldiers return their ramrods every time, unless they're in an earthwork or something. In those situations, I could see if you're behind a breastwork, then maybe you might not put it back every time. But even then, that probably would be discouraged by your NCOs. So hopefully that's helpful, and that explains why I do put my ramrod back every time, because that's what the soldiers then would have done. It might cost me a couple more seconds, but I think that is more useful information for us than just purely trick shooting to see just what is the shortest possible amount of time I can load and fire around it. But I'm Brett, papercartridges.com. This was your 19th century ramrod lesson for the day, and I will see you